Hello and welcome to the FlowForma customer webinar. Here I'll be discussing new features in our latest release, Release 7.2, which is available right now. First, let me just talk about some housekeeping. For assistance during the call, please email info@flowforma.com. Your lines are muted, but please type your questions into the chat box and there will be some time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. After the webinar, if you'd like a more in-depth demo or to try out these new features, please contact your territory manager and they will arrange a one-to-one demo. Just a little bit of information on myself. My name is Paul Stone. I'll be familiar to some of you on the call already. I'm a solution architect working in the pre-sales team, and I've been with FlowForma since its inception. So I'm quite a product expert and an evangelist, and today I'll be talking to you about these great new features we've got in our system. A quick overview of the agenda. I'm going to talk today about tenant licensing, which is a new feature that allows you to license across your tenant regardless of the number of sites. We'll talk a bit about usage reporting. That's where you're identifying who in your organization is actually using FlowForma, and the whole theory behind usage reporting is to allow you to cross-charge activity across different departments in a large organization. Quite interestingly, FlowForma Connect, which is our new platform for integrating into cloud-based and on-premise applications. I think a lot of you will be interested in what you can achieve through this. I'm also going to revisit FlowForma Engage. Now, for those of you who've attended previous customer webinars, you know that I'm quite a fan of Engage and I've covered off many use cases. And we have clients now using it for new use cases. And I'm going to talk through those and how FlowForma Engage can be used to extend FlowForma outside of your organization. As usual, I'm also going to talk a little bit about our roadmap to tell you about what's going to be occurring in the next customer webinar, what's coming up. And then we'll have a section for quick Q&A at the end. Okay, so it's a very interactive session today, and I'm going to be doing a lot of live demonstrations. Fingers crossed it will all go well. And as I say, if you have any questions that come up during the demonstrations, please type them into your chat area and I will get around to answering them at the end of the demonstration. Okay, let me exit out of here. And first thing is to cover off tenant-based licensing. So what does that mean? Well, if I go to my governance hub here, you may remember from the last customer webinar that I did, I covered off the governance application. Now, governance application allows you to manage multiple environments in your tenant. So if you have a Office 365 tenant and you want to deploy FlowForma several times to several different sites, the FlowForma governance app makes that very straightforward. It promotes the whole idea of people using sandboxes where you pass a site out to, let's say, a business developer, and the business developer actually constructs a flow and then requests that flow to be promoted into production via UAT, for example. That can all be managed very easily using our governance app. Now, I'm not going to do a full demo again of the governance app. There's more information on our website. But we have consistently upgraded our governance app to add in new features. So for example, in the last release, we added the adoption hub. This adoption hub allows you to deploy default themes and so on to your various sites in your organization. But today I'm going to talk to you about the licensing hub. Now, the licensing hub allows you to monitor all the sites that have been deployed in your organization. I just refresh there. And it allows you to actually manage those sites. So if you've deployed multiple application sites across your tenant with many different purposes, so one might be deployed for finance, the other might be deployed for IT, one might be deployed for sales, that might all be done through the governance application. But if you want to manage the actual license limits and so on the various sites that you've constructed, then you can use the licensing hub to do so. And what it means is that you no longer need to apply keys and so on to different sites. So as most of you on the call will know, Typically, when you installed FlowForma as an application into your site, you had to go and apply a license key. So you had to obtain a license key, first of all, and then apply it to the site and manage it on the site. With tenant-based licensing, the new licensing approach, if you're an Office 365 and you have an Enterprise Plus license, you get one tenant license and you can start and create as many sites as you like. And then the license will apply to your entire tenant and you can manage it through this licensing hub. Now, the information displayed here shows me all the sites that I've created where I've installed the app. So these sites would have been created, in fact, automatically by the Governance Hub, and the app would have been created and installed on the site automatically. It then shows up in this list, and you can literally turn the individual sites on and off by toggling the site here. So you're quickly seeing who created the site, when it was last active, and so on. The current user count, the number of users using the site, and then you can make decisions as to whether you want them licensed or not. Now, in the background, what the system does, it maintains the license across the tenant. So let's say you had a user license for 1,000 users on your tenant. It will just maintain that license in the background. So if the user is logged in, registered for access to the finance site and also access to the IT site, for example, that counts as one license space being used up. Basically, we count those 1,000 users based on the number of unique users. So Paul Stone is on 3 sites. Well, that's just one user being used up. And basically, the tenant just the tenant-based licensing just manages that automatically. The great thing is it gives you complete freedom when you're using the governance app to create as many sandboxes and production sites and so on as you like. It all just depends on the particular environment that you're in as to how you want to approach developing and deploying FlowForma. You get complete freedom using this new tenant-based licensing. Now, in addition to that, the system will also provide you with usage reports. So you can actually see the usage of FlowForma in your organization. Now, today, the usage reports run off the licensing information. Okay, so we gather all the license details and we actually store the basic license details on our application server, our licensing server. You should be aware of that. So there is some information stored in our servers relating to product licensing. And that information is then used to generate a usage report. Now, the usage report here is very straightforward, but the key thing, I suppose, with this release is that we're capturing all that data. In the release that's coming out in 2 weeks' time in June, we also have a new report in this section. And this is a screenshot of it from the UAT environment, our own UAT environment, that shows you much more rich detail in the usage analytics. So in this case, we can specify a time period, and we can see basically forms, the number of forms started in that time period, broken down by cost center. We can also see the number of forms completed or steps completed, again, broken down by cost center. And we can see a tabular report of that information. You can export that report to Excel. And with all that level of detail, you have enough information to do cross-charging between departments, and you have all the backup information, if you like, that you need to do that cross-charging. So a usage report feature will provide larger organizations with the ability to actively cross-charge on a monthly basis, let's say, usage of FlowForma within your organization. Now, if I just jump out of here, so that quickly covers off what the licensing hub does within the governance application. And really, again, the cost of the idea of it is that it will allow you to manage all the environments in your organization. It removes the restrictions. And at the end of the day, with the usage reporting, it will allow you to monitor usage by cost center or by division within your organization. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to talk to you about is FlowForma Connect. Now, FlowForma Connect is our new way of integration with applications. So at the moment, when you look at FlowForma, and if you take, for example, a standard workflow here, we have a number of integration business rules in our Flow Designer that allow you to integrate with external systems. So I guess everybody on the call will be familiar with what I'm talking about. And when you look at the business rules, here for data integration, you see there's lots of business rules that allow you to integrate with SQL Store procedures, for example, integrate with HubSpot, Dynamics, and so on. I won't go through them all, but the key thing here is that it's a finite set of integration options. So what if you have a system that is not supported with our out-of-the-box integration business rules? So for example, let's say you wanted to send a message to Slack. Well, you certainly can't do that with any out-of-the-box business rule. So we've developed a mechanism for you to integrate with third-party applications via Microsoft Logic Apps. Now, Microsoft Logic Apps is an integration platform as a service that allows you to basically integrate with a host of cloud platforms, but also with on-premise gateways as well. Sorry, on-premise applications via a gateway. It's really quite a comprehensive tool, and it can integrate with more than 200 applications. So it's a great way of integrating easily with external applications. The downside of Logic Apps, I guess, is that it's not really a no-code solution. You do have to have some technical awareness to be able to use it. So what we've done is we've built an easy way of leveraging Logic Apps to integrate with third-party tools. Now, it does involve a little bit of technical know-how, so it's not necessarily for everybody on this call, but if you can master it, certainly this is the way to go. And if you can't master it, our customer services team are available to actually build out these interfaces for you. It's quite straightforward. And in fact, I'm going to do one right now using our demonstration environment. So the first thing we need to do is talk a little bit about what Logic Apps is. So Logic Apps is a tool that's provided by Microsoft as part of Azure services. And Azure services are available via your Azure licensing pack. So you will have signed an agreement with Microsoft to provide you with access to Azure services, and Logic Apps is just one of those services. If I look at some existing Logic Apps that I have here, or maybe if I create a new one, what we'll do here is we'll try and send a message to Slack, for example, as an example, as a demonstration process. So I'm going to say send notification to sales team. That's going to be my name of the Logic app, and I'm not allowed spaces. Hence, I've got to put in these underscores. And for those on the team who are used to technical configuration and writing code and so on, they'll understand exactly why those underscores that need to be there. But there, I guess, some of the little things that you need to know that which would come naturally to a person who develops, but less naturally to a business user. However, it's straightforward enough, and then we can basically pick I have to pick a space here. And let's create this Logic app. Sorry for the screen refreshing there. And here is my Logic app. And the very first thing I need to do is decide what how I'm going to start this Logic app. So I'm going to say when a HTTP request is received. Okay, so I created this new Logic app to send a notification to sales team. I'm now going to go back over to FlowForma, and I'm going to create a business rule that when I type in the customer name, I'm going to send a notification over to Slack using my Logic app. So I'm going to create a business rule here called Call Azure Logic App. So this is a new business rule that we've created that makes it easy for FlowForma to talk to logic app. So I can pass data to and from the logic app using this business rule. And here I'm going to say, send notification to sales team. And then I'm going to decide what I'm going to send. Well, first of all, I'm going to pick a question, and I'm going to send a customer name, and also I'm going to send a customer notification. And now that I've decided what I want to pass to my logic app, to the external service, I can copy the request structure, jump back over to my logic app, and paste it in here. Okay, now when I save that, it generates a URL up here. Now, guys, I know some of you on this call will be thinking, hey, this looks complicated. And while it is complicated, in terms of integration, this is actually relatively straightforward. And as you'll see, I'll get this up and running in no time at all. Let me just check that's the full URL there. Yep. And what it does is it allows you to quickly create these little integration pieces. Oops, excuse me. And I'm now going to add a new step. And what I want to do is I want to talk to Slack. Now, there are over 200 connectors that you can use in Logic Apps. So literally, you just type in the name of the service that you want to connect to. There's lots of services provided straight out of the box. And lots of third-party applications, including, by the way, some very sophisticated applications. So for example, SAP, you can integrate with SAP using Logic Apps, which really is saying something in that it's a relatively cheap way of integrating into a big back-end ERP system. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to post a message. These are all the various things that I can do with Slack, which is the service I've selected, excuse me. And here I can decide to send a message. And what I'm going to do is send a message to, I think I have a sales channel down here somewhere. Oh, my sales forecast channel, that'll do. And I'm going to send a message text. Please see information from this customer. And then I'm going to pick the customer name. So you can see here I can add dynamic content. And this is the content that's coming from FlowForma. So I can quickly create this. And then I can put in the actual notification. So the notification text detail. And that's it. So I press save. Now my Logic app is saved. If I go back, excuse me. If I go back to my configuration screen, my rule is defined already. It's saved. So when I enter in a customer name, it will automatically send this information. So now if I close this and create a new form, I can enter in the information and then it will automatically send across to FlowForma. Now it's actually sent the notification there because I put it on the customer name business rules. So let me just hop over to Slack. If I go into my sales forecast, please see information from this customer test customer. So it's very fast. I mean, what we're talking about here is basically passing information from a HTML5 application, that's the form here, running in your browser, straight over to a cloud service, completely different application. In this case, we're using Slack as an example. And we see this information automatically appearing here in my Slack channel sales forecast. So that's quite a quick way of integrating with external services. Now, just to say that the extent of services covered by Logic Apps is really very significant. there's over 200 cloud applications available, but you can also connect to on-premise applications as well. If I just jump over here, here's Microsoft's page showing its various connectors that are available. And there's really a very wide range. So you can integrate with Outlook, for example, with SharePoint Online, with Dynamics 365, Salesforce, and also down the line, you can talk to various more technical integrations like IBM DB2. And down at the very bottom, I think we'll find our enterprise level connectors. Here we go with SAP. So really there's lots of integration options. And if you are more technically aware, this is a great simple way of integrating with external applications. And this is versus doing it the slightly harder way, which is coding your own business rules, which requires you to code in JavaScript and so on. So this method of integration really works very well. And it's a preferred option, a recommended option for integrating with third-party applications. Now, just to say, in terms of Azure, is this a free service? Well, no. First of all, you would need to be on Enterprise Plus to get access to that business rule, the FlowForma Connect business rule. And the next thing is Azure itself, there is a small cost associated with it. So basically, it's available on the Microsoft website, but you notice that there is a small charge for every single transaction that you pass through the Logic app. So for me sending that message to Slack, that's going to cost me 0.0001 of a euro in this instance, or let's see what it would cost in the US. So it costs a very small amount to execute a Logic app, and ultimately those amounts are all billed to your Azure account with Microsoft. Okay, so just to explain that there is a small cost associated with Azure, and then there's the cost of the Enterprise Plus pack to get the question. Now you could build your own custom questions that call a Logic app. That can be done. So if you are stuck on corporate for whatever reason, you can build your own business rules. Again, that involves some JavaScript coding, which may or may not be acceptable to you. So it's really up to your own environment as to what the best approach is for integration into your specific backend systems and so on. Okay, the next thing I'd like to talk about is FlowForma Engage. And FlowForma Engage, if I can just pop onto the right tab here. I've talked about FlowForma Engage before. As you may know, it's a managed service that we provide that allows anonymous access. So basically, external entities can interact with your workflows. It's very useful for all sorts of reasons. We've talked about things like customer feedback in the past. I've also talked about things like document approval, where it can be used for that too. But we're finding customers are adopting this and really using it for all sorts of interesting purposes. This is just one example where we're interacting with a vendor. So where we initially enter a vendor name here, the system automatically identifies the vendor ID, and then it will send an email to the vendor email address here. And then that vendor will be able to review product information and respond back. And it's a little bit more complex than an example I've showed before because it uses an interim database. So what it's doing is at the very outset in my, sorry, if I could just jump back here into my form, it's capturing this information back from a SQL database. It's actually a Azure SQL database. And then it sends an email, which is actually an email that has a link in it, and the link contains a unique ID. So I don't know if you can see that very well there, 10028 in this particular case, but I typically would use a GUID, for those of you who understand what that is, as part of the URL. And when you click on that URL, it launches an anonymous form. So the vendor does not need to have any access to your systems directly. It launches an anonymous form that automatically pulls all this detail back from the SQL database, and then the vendor can go in and enter in these additional missing pieces of information and submit that, and it will pass the information back through the SQL database into your Office 365 environment, into that form in the Office 365 environment. So this really allows you to interact with external entities in more complex ways than those that I've demonstrated before. And it's not just used for this example of vendor maintenance. Any example where you might have a legal entity who needs to interact with you in some way, you can use this method to achieve that. And examples from the field of people using it are the most prominent one is suppliers. So where you're onboarding a new supplier, the supplier has to fill in an onboarding form, and they can do it using this method. And it's also used for customer interaction as well. It's very useful for as part of a customer onboarding process to be able to send out a link in an email. The customer clicks on a link and then automatically jumps in and fills in the detail they need to supply to the purchasing department and so on. So it's being used increasingly in this more complex way to gather information from various external entities external to your organization. So I'd just like to talk now about what's coming up next in FlowForma, the FlowForma roadmap. Well, as I said earlier on, we're launching that usage reporting in 2 weeks' time when we make the next interim release. Excuse me. But in terms of the July release, which is our next quarterly release, we're going to launch our Flow Designer wizard for Engage. So where at the moment, using Engage involves you having to go into our Engage service and can create a form and then link it to the other form in your Office 365 environment. It involves several steps to do this. From July onwards, you'll have a simple wizard that you use from your Flow Designer. So I can jump right back over here and I can go in and edit the vendor maintenance form here. And inside the vendor maintenance form on your Office 365 environment, you can actually run through a wizard that will allow you to automatically create a step in the Engage environment. So you're not having to jump between two different environments, which is quite complex to configure. And the system will just automatically do that for you. So we'll simply know where your Engage environment is, and it will automatically say that, okay, this step is going to be executed externally. And it really makes the whole, it really increases the potential for using FlowForma as a tool for CX within the organization. So if you're interacting with customers, if you're interacting with suppliers, it really makes it very easy in a very no-code way to simply say that, okay, this part of the process is going to be external. And it adds a lot of value to that, that already very useful FlowForma Engage feature. In terms of further down the line, our next big release will contain a health checker stroke debugger. Now, a lot of our clients have asked us to improve how we monitor and report bugs in Flow Design. It's a little bit different to coding, by the way. If anybody's familiar with coding debuggers, the FlowForma debugger will be quite different. But what it does is it will highlight any logical errors in your workflow design. Also, it will give you pointers as to how best to optimize your workflow. So these are features that we've taken some time to do this, by the way. I know that in the past I would have spoken to some of you and said, okay, well, this is around the corner, and it's taken a little longer than I expected. But the reason simply is that FlowForma is quite unlike a typical coding tool, because it's a no-code system, obviously, and it needs some thought into how best to provide a kind of debugging environment, an environment where you can spot logical errors in your workflow, and when you change something, you can quickly see the impact of that change and so on. So it's taking a little bit longer than I originally would have suggested, but it is coming, and it's coming straight after our CX Flow Designer wizard. So it's coming down the line in a kind of 6-month time frame or less. Further down the line, we're looking at rebuilding the mobile application. Mobile application is in use by a lot of organizations at this stage, and it does its job well enough. However, we feel that it could be improved in certain areas, and we'll be looking into that towards the end of the year. And then further on from that, there will be improvements in terms of localization and so on. Okay, so that gives you a quick overview of what's happening with FlowForma, where we're going with the product, and what's currently in the system right now in version 7.2, and also what will be coming in the shorter term as well in terms of usage monitoring and so on. Okay, so now I'd like to take any questions if I may. Let me just see what's on the list. Okay, so the first question is related to the tenant-based licensing feature. So is the tenant-based licensing switched on by default? So the answer is no. So basically, if you're an existing Office 365 customer, we won't be switching on tenant-based licensing for you. Okay, so it's basically a decision that we both will make as to when we when we should switch it on. So it will be something that's done at the moment. It's done on request. Now it's something, however, that we feel that a lot of our enterprise customers will want, because it means it frees them from the setup of new sites and the separate licensing of new sites and so on. And when we switch on enterprise licensing, all of your existing sites will be automatically included in your tenant-based license. Okay, so what we would suggest is that you get in contact with us, and we, which via your territory manager or else the support team, and we will organize the switching on of tenant-based licensing. If you're using the governance app at the moment, it's important to understand that the tenant-based licensing feature will not work until you've been converted over to a tenant-based license. Okay. Where is the usage information stored? Well, all the usage information that we capture, which we're capturing right now, is stored on our licensing server. So basically, it's stored in the FlowForma server that manages client-based licensing. However, rest assured that we don't capture any actual data that you have. It's literally just configuration information that's stored in our server. Can external apps trigger updates to existing forms via Logic Apps? Yes and no. So at the moment, you can, using Logic Apps, you can create a form. So for example, when you receive an email in Outlook in a certain inbox, Logic Apps can then create a FlowForma form automatically and include, let's say, detail from that message. So we have that ability to create a form using Logic Apps, but we don't have the ability to update an existing form directly. So what you would do is you would write information in a similar manner to the way Engage works at the moment. You would write information to a SQL database, and then the FlowForma form would read that information as soon as it opens. If you talk to our CS team, they can give you more information on the technique that you use to achieve that. Okay, so can Engage be used to interact with customers? Yeah, you can absolutely do that. Customers do not have to have a login. You can use the anonymous feature. Now, we do actually have an Engage option for secure users. We have, I think, 1 or 2 clients using that, where we manage user accounts so that the users can have secure access to their Engage environment. It's rare that the use case requires that, to be honest with you. Most of our clients are using the kind of GUID approach, whereby you send a link with GUID, and then the link actually resolves the client details when they click on it in their email. You can also add PIN functionality on that, by the way. So you can send a client, let's say, 2 emails, one with the link, one with a PIN, and then when they click on the link, they've got to enter the PINs. So you can kind of increase the level of security there. Yep. Okay, and I think that's it for questions. So I'm just going to switch back to my deck here, and just to say that to sum up, we talked about tenant licensing, usage reporting, FlowForma Connect, Engage, and then a little bit about our roadmap. And the last thing I'd like to show you is this, which is basically in just a few days' time, we're going to run a webinar which involves using our, involves our existing customers talking about how they've used FlowForma as part of the digital transformation program. And we have many customers now who've been with us a long time, and we have three showing up at the webinar who will talk about how they've benefited from FlowForma and how they've introduced it into their organization, what the take-up rate has been like, and so on. So it looks to be a very interesting show. I think I'll tell you that one myself, and that's coming up just in a couple of days' time, May 16th. And you can go and onto our website, flowforma.com, and register for that event if you'd like to attend. Okay, thank you very much for attending today, and I will hopefully speak to you again in about 3 months' time. See you then, guys. Bye-bye.